Mega Man 4 DOS is typically considered to be one of the worst games ever made, not even including the Mega Man series, but I just beat it for the first time and I disagree. And if you don't believe me, watch this video and let me convince you. And also, this is still Wii Wednesday because there is a DOS simulator on the Wii. So, hopefully everyone is happy. Before getting into the game, I have to make a confession. While there is a DOS simulator on the Wii, it's a little buggy and the game runs way too fast. There are ways to fix this, but it's a big pain in the tuchus, so I'll just be honest, I played this one on the PC. It was still hard to set it up and get it to run on PC, but it was a lot easier than doing it on the Wii, and I want this video to be as good for you guys as possible. But this is still a Wii Wednesday video canonically, because it is possible to play this game on the Wii. I don't want to hear any complaining about that in the comment section, or else I'll go to your house and I'll eat all your fresh fruit. I won't leave a trace either, so good luck finding out or pinning any evidence against me. Anyway, let's talk about the actual game, Mega Man DOS. At first glance, this game looks horrible. Mega Man looks ugly, the game as a whole seems weird, and worst of all, it's on DOS. But this was actually a pretty fun challenge for a Mega Man veteran like myself, so let's take a look at what this game has to offer before I try to convince you guys of anything. First of all, the game has no music, which is a little bit creepy, but it's also the first Mega Man game to have an intro stage ever, which later became a pretty big staple for the franchise. Now, is it a good intro stage? No, this is probably the worst stage in the game from a design point of view. You are breaking into some sort of electrical facility and you have to get past this guard dog, except you cannot kill him. Well, you technically can, but it'll just respawn immediately in front of you and then you die. So you have to just damage boost past the dog the entire time. That's the only way to beat the intro stage. Luckily, it is a short stage with nothing else, and you have just enough health to survive the hungry guard dog. But that's it, you beat that stage and you're at the classic Robot Master select screen, except there are only 3 Robot Masters. This is a bit weird, but honestly, I would be mad if there were any more. I remember seeing this image of the stage select screen online on the internet various times as a kid, and I always thought this was just bad fan art, so finding out it's a real game and being able to actually play it is crazy. Just to be clear though, now that I know this is on DOS, I don't think it's all that bad. This is just how DOS looks, there isn't really anything you could do about it. But back to the actual game, let me give you some tips on boss order. All of the bosses themselves are actually pretty easy and probably the easiest part of the entire game, but they're still a little bit challenging. They aren't like stupid easy. But the stage order that I found the easiest to go through was Sonic Man on the left, Volt Man on the top, and finally Dynaman on the right very last. The first thing you'll notice about this cast of Robot Masters is that Sonic Man is not a blue hedgehog that runs fast. Okay, that wasn't funny, I'm sorry. I'll talk about the stages individually, but I think this was the easiest way to beat the game because the weapons you get are super useful for dealing with some of the unfair elements in each of the stages. Oh yeah, I don't know if I've said this yet, but this is probably the hardest Mega Man game I've ever played. Again, I don't think it's a bad game at all, as I'll elaborate on later, but it is incredibly hard in mostly unfair ways. But enough build up, let's take a look at Sonic Man stage first, since that's the first one that I beat. We start off on a pretty tame stage before we go down into the actual level where we get bombarded with frogs and bats. There aren't a lot of classic Mega Man enemies in this game, by the way, but some Mets and Sniper Joes do end up making an appearance, so don't worry, Jamers. These frogs are really hard to hit, so it's very easy to just lose half of your health in the first screen of the game. Luckily though, these bats respawn forever, so you can farm your health back, which I would normally never do in a Mega Man game, but you really need to in this one. The main reason the frogs are so hard to hit, other than their small hitboxes, are the controls, which are the arrow keys of course, the spacebar to shoot, and J to jump. These are awful and I don't know how to change them. I mean, I totally do know how to change them, I just wanted the authentic DOS experience while playing. That's the only way to get a fair review, right? One of the main reasons these controls are so bad though is because I just played Mega 4K Man for a video and that one had spacebar for shoot and up on the arrow keys for jump, so it's very disorienting trying to switch it up and I get confused a lot. That aside, it is nice that you have a farming room right here and there are generous health drops in this game, but the only way out of this room is to destroy these walls. But something unique to this game about destroying certain things is that they explode. Not like in Mega Man X or any other Mega Man game. They explode in a way that damages you, so you cannot be close to the wall when you blow it up or else you will get damaged. Now, if I was a lazy YouTuber, I'd say, oh, this is awful game design and this is why this game is bad and yada yada yada. But it's really not bad game design. It's just a little bit jarring in the first playthrough, but once you understand that these things explode and know not to get too close, it makes sense. And again, this is is just a challenging game, so there's a lot of stuff like that you have to get used to. Anyway, after blowing up the wall and getting sucked up into some pipes, you travel down into a bullet heck room where the only safe space is in this corner right here. Again, the hitboxes of all the enemies are small, so you really need to get used to that, but you need to kill all of these things to get through the level. In the other Mega Man games, you can really get away with a lot of damage boosting, just way more in general, but in this one, you die very quickly, so just try not to get hit ever. You will get hit, but try not to get hit because you cannot afford damage boosting. There's also a rat at the bottom of the screen that's too small to get hit by your bullets unless he's standing straight up, so you gotta wait on that before moving on. In the next room, we have the first of 2 E-Tanks in this entire game, but there is a fun exploit I discovered while playing. If you get this E-Tank and then game over, you keep your E-Tank after the game over and then it respawns. So you can actually grind out a ton of E-Tanks this way, making the game a whole lot easier. I don't know what the max is because I only got 6, but I'll talk more about E-Tanks later. Oh, what's that? You're wondering how I got this E-Tank in the first place? Yeah, there's an invisible ladder right here. Duh, isn't that obvious? Don't try to jump up there, you can't do it. Anyway, these first couple of rooms with the rats and the bullets are probably the hardest to get past without dying, especially because you gotta deal with some more frogs before the checkpoints. And I love frogs, don't get me wrong, but these guys did not make it to my top 10 best frogs video for a very good reason. Anyway, once you get to the underwater section, you get a nice and needed checkpoint. This room is still hard because shooting these fish is almost impossible unless you're on top of those smaller platforms, so you have to try your best to dodge them. Luckily, it's a lot easier than everything else we've dealt with so far, so it's a nice little breather before we get into one of the worst rooms in the entire game. Once you get to the end, we have this Elecman style ladder segment where you gotta dodge some more projectiles followed by one of the worst rooms in the game. Definitely not the #1 worst, but it really sucks. First of all, you have these giant electricity things on the floor that you have to jump over, but they have strange hitboxes, so you have to jump way earlier than it looks like you should. But that's not the worst part. There's also infinitely spawning bats, but that's not the worst part either. That's actually the only thing that makes this room bearable. What makes this room so bad is that all the platforms have weird hitboxes just in general, where you have to jump way earlier than it looks like you should just to get past everything, and you have to get up like 4 or 5 layers of floor before getting out. And if you miss a single jump, you fall all the way back down to the bottom, losing half of your health to those electricity things. This might not look bad just from a gameplay point of view, like as you watching the gameplay in this YouTube video, but when every jump is a fight for your life, it's very depressing to fall all the way back down to the bottom with 3 health left. Luckily, once again, you can farm, but if you weren't able to do that, I might have gone insane. At the very least though, this room does get you used to Mega Man's jump and the platform hitboxes before some more deadly challenges later on in the game, so it's not the worst room ever, but it is certainly frustrating. Once you make it out of this abysmal room though, you're met with a block puzzle. Yippee! This one looks really easy, but with the physics of the game and the controls, it's a lot harder than it should be. Not as hard as the last room, but still not fun. Once again, we do get an enemy to farm for health though, so surprisingly good game design in this level despite everything I've complained about, especially since the boss is in the very next room, so it's a good thing we have this eel here to farm. Luckily, even if you don't farm, like I said, the bosses are extremely easy compared to the levels, but you do still have to play the game. They aren't a free kill. If the bosses were just as hard as these levels though, and I game overed at a boss at the very end of a hard level like this, I probably would have just deleted my channel, but since you're watching this video, that clearly never happened. But anyway, that's Sonic Man stage. It's the second hardest in the game, and I'll go into detail about how I feel about each level after we beat the game here, but up next we have Voltman stage, which is by far the hardest stage in the game, as you'll soon find out. The reason I think it's a good idea to do this stage second is actually because Sonic Man's weapon comes in handy multiple times during this level, and it is the weakness to the boss. Once again, there's some pretty good game design here considering what all we've witnessed, but there's also some horrible game design in this level specifically, which I will point out. First of all, we start on some telephone wires with birds that feel like attacking us today, and every time you take damage you fall down to a lower level, and at the very bottom you die. It's a hole, it's a pit, you die. It's Mega Man. I actually do think this is a cool mechanic though, but because this game is so tricky, it might take you a bit to get used to dodging all the birds and electrical charges that are on the phone lines. The problem with this level starts to present itself after the telephone poles though, with these magnet machine things. These first couple are easy to deal with, but you do get chased by tiny mosquitoes that are hard to kill, but luckily they are slow, so spamming your buster should do them in. I also want to point out, I like the look of this level a lot more than the last one. The machines look cool, but the next room is where things just gets awful. This might actually be the worst room in the entire game. Luckily, there is a checkpoint in this room, but I think me and all 3 of the other people who have ever played this game wish there was another checkpoint right after this room, because now we have magnet things that go way too far. First of all, we have the bee enemy from Mega Man X that Mega Man X clearly stole from this game, coming in every few seconds, which does a lot of damage. But getting past this magnet obstacle is genuinely the hardest thing in the entire game. There are 2 Electman style thunder strikes on either end. The first one is always easy to dodge because the magnet pulls you towards it, so you can dodge it very fast. But escaping the magnet's pull is almost impossible. If you don't jump and just try to time walking correctly, it's literally impossible and you cannot do it. So you have to constantly jump and try to time it perfectly while also sniping this bee that shows up every few seconds, because if it shoots you, it's back to square one. And even if everything aligns perfectly, you need like frame perfect timing to get out of this magnet. It's hard to put into words how difficult this is, but if you play this game and think any part is hard, just know this is by far the hardest part in the entire game. And do you know what you get as a reward for getting through the first magnet? Another one just like it, so you have to do it perfectly twice without dying, because the checkpoint is right behind the first magnet. Luckily, I will say with how many times I died to this stage, I got more and more used to the magnet and learned the jumping trick, but good grief, this part is so hard. It almost seems like there's an element of luck involved just because it's so inconsistent, but anyway, we made it past, gamers, so let's move on. In the very next room, we have spiders, which are one of my least favorite things on the planet Earth. Right next to the people who aren't subscribed, of course, subscribe, and you'll be my favorite person. If you aren't subscribed, you are awful. Don't think I won't eat your fresh fruit too. These spiders are so small that your normal buster shot goes right over them, but luckily, we have Sonic Man's weapon, which shoots low enough to kill them. Also, by the way, the controls for pausing and selecting a weapon is escape for pause, and then S for Sonic Man's weapon. Just thought I would let you guys know in case you were wondering. Anyway, this weapon really comes in clutch because trying to time your jumps over these things would be a nightmare. We are also greeted with a big health power-up, which is nice, and once again, pretty good game design after what we just went through. I know that's not like the most genius game design ever, but I just want to point out the bits of good game design I see, because a lot of people like to dunk on this game due to a lack of skill, which I don't think is fair. Plus, we all know I am the greatest Mega Man player of all time, so I would never sink so low. Anyway, next we have a pretty basic room with some more mosquitoes you gotta kill, but I actually like these guys because they tend to give me a lot of drops. After this, we have the second E-Tank in the game, but it's guarded by a wall. The only way to break that wall is by once again using Sonic Man's weapon, which is another reason why I wanted to go to Sonic Man's stage first. You can't jump and shoot it though, you have to ricochet the weapon off the wall at the right angle to free the E-Tank. And also, the wall explodes, so you better climb back up the ladder if you actually want to collect the E-Tank. This E-Tank is much more of a pain to farm with game overs though, due to having to surpass both magnet obstacles before getting here, but it is a nice reward for passing the magnets if you do game over and have to do it again. But coming up here, we have another disappearing block puzzle that is much harder than the last one. Not only are there insta-kill spikes underneath, but also those waterfalls are not for decoration. They push you down, so you have to gain your jump height in between the waterfalls while timing your jumps on the weird hitbox platforms. I won't lie, I did die here once or twice, but I still think the magnets are way more frustrating than this, and they don't even kill you, so that goes to show how awful they are. But just like the magnets, once you beat the first block puzzle, you have to do another one with more insta-kill spikes underneath. This one seems a lot harder, but I got past it first try somehow. Maybe it's just because I was focusing extra hard due to not wanting to redo both magnets and another block puzzle, but who knows. Once you get past the second block puzzle, you finally get to another checkpoint, and the rest of the level is a breeze. There's just this one long room left, and admittedly, it can be tricky, but if you're patient and careful, you shouldn't die here, and you should be able to get to the end and take on the boss. This boss is allegedly the hardest in the game, but it's still a pushover, especially if you have Sonic Man's weapon. This boss has a shield, so he can't be damaged until he does his attack, but the bosses in this game have no invincibility frames, so if you can get close enough, you can just spam him and melt his health bar, which is why they're all so easy. Even with the plain old dude, there's no iframes. You could just spam and melt every boss in this game. It doesn't matter. But anyway, that's the hardest stage of this game completed. One thing I found out after beating this excruciatingly difficult stage though is that there's actually a fun glitch to skip the entire thing. If you have an E-Tank just fall off into the hole at the very beginning of the stage, use your E-Tank right as you die, and this will make you live past the hole and fall right in front of the boss door. This is admittedly really cool, but I wish I would have known about this before I beat the entire thing twice with the jank controls. Anyway, if you've made it this far, the rest of the game is honestly going to be really easy because Dynaman stage is incredibly easy compared to the first two. I thought this stage would at least be just as hard, but I beat this entire stage without dying on my very first try, which is something I thought might be impossible on those other 2 stages. Also, Voltman gives you a shield weapon that's actually decent and very useful in this stage, as we'll see. I didn't use it in Dynaman stage because I don't like shield weapons, as you know, and I'm very stubborn, but there are a lot of areas where it would make it way easier. But enough talking, let's start this so-called easy stage. In Dynaman stage, we start off with some crates and some bees that drop, I think nails on top of you. I'm not sure, but this is much easier to deal with than every other stage's first main room. Plus, if you have Voltman's shield weapon, you can deal with the enemies and projectiles without getting damaged, which is very nice. After that brief section, we get to see conveyor belts just like Metal Man stage. Unlike the magnets, these are easy to deal with and actually they feel fun. Just don't hit the spikes, don't do it, you will die. After that, we have a conveyor belt with some junk blocks that appear not to do anything. They just make noise as you go through them, and I think they might refill your weapon ammo, but I honestly don't know. Maybe it's just a bug, but I'm not complaining. After a fairly easy jump, we're met with yet another block puzzle. This one seemed hard, and when I fell off, I thought I was dead in the insta-kill lava, but it turns out this insta-kill lava is not insta-kill lava. This is shocking considering how unfair other parts of the game have been, but it's also the main reason this stage is so easy. Sure, it does do a good bit of damage, but if you make sure to farm enemies when you can, you should be okay even if you do fall into the lava. Now we have a gauntlet of jumps over the lava with fire raining down from below and above. Honestly, I just ran through this section as fast as I could and I somehow was okay. I don't know if there's a strategy or if I just got lucky, but again, this is why I've been saying this is the easiest stage, because this looks like it would be just as hard, if not harder, than some of the other sections, yet I had zero issues with it. After that, we have yet another easy part with those lava drops from Mega Man 2 Wily 6, followed by another room similar to the first with crates and bees. Again, pretty easy to deal with. This is followed up by another conveyor belt with hands and other things that try to get you. This is still easy to dodge, so you shouldn't have any trouble here. Just be patient and I guess look where you're going. I don't know how to give advice on this because it's so easy when compared to everything else we've had to deal with so far. But anyway, after this giant ladder, we have the last section of the level with some more ants that are too short to be hit by your regular attack. Luckily though, we have Sonic Man's weapon, so we can take these ants out very easily. And that's it. That's the whole stage. I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit, and I beat it on my first try without dying. And of course, the boss once again is very easy because there aren't any invincibility frames, so just use the shield weapon and kill that guy. With all 3 robot masters taken out, we get this pretty looking graphic and are told that it's time to go into Wily's castle. Unlike the other Mega Man games, there is only one level, but it is a Mega Man X style boss rush where you have to fight each robot master again and go through parts of their stages before you get to the boss. Which once again is surprisingly good game design considering how much everyone hates this game. I mean, Mega Man X copied this and that's one of the best games ever made. Anyway, this stage is pretty straightforward because it's a lot of stuff we've already seen, but we do at least get to see both Mets and Sniper Joes. Finally, this is what we've truly been waiting for, gamers. Some good old Mets and Sniper Joes. Now, these guys will make my top 10 Mets or my top 10 Sniper Joes video whenever I do that, but it's still nice to see a familiar face. The only hard part about this stage is that if you die at any point before the final boss, you have to start the entire thing from the beginning, which I learned the hard way by dying close to the end, assuming I had a checkpoint. I assumed wrong. It was also at this point that I realized those 6 E-tanks that I saved were overkill because I only used 1 to get past this level and then I just had 5 left for the rest of the game. I bet those 2 really hard levels would have been a lot easier had I used my 6 E-tanks, but we live and learn, I guess. Anyway, at the end of the level, we get health and weapon energy refill right before the final boss of the game. This is a robot walker thing, and I didn't look up what it was weak to, but Sonic Man's weapon destroyed it. Once its first phase was destroyed, we got to see Dr. Wily piloting the machine. I know I shouldn't be surprised by this, but it was a pleasant surprise to not only see a second phase, but also Dr. Wily as the pilot in the battle. After I ran out of Sonic Man's weapon, I just used the plain old dude because this boss seemed really easy. You just go to the left, spam shoot, then right before it gets to you, you jump over him and repeat on the right side. Then he dies and you've beaten the game. As a reward, we get to look at this screen where they call him Dr. Wily with an E. How nice. But honestly, I really like typos in screens like this, like congratulations. I think that's funny. I mean, a lot of people, like lazy YouTubers, would dunk on this and be like, see, this is why this game is so bad. But I think this is funny. It's a funny typo. It's harmless. Who cares? Now that we have officially beaten Mega Man DOS, it's time for me to explain to you guys why I like this game so much. Okay, well, like is a strong word, but it's a lot better than people give it credit for, especially considering it was programmed single-handedly by one human being. That's right, this game was single-handedly made by one person. I bet you're a lot more impressed by Mega Man DOS now, aren't you? No? Are you serious? Well, how about you try making something in MS-DOS? That's right, this game was coded single-handedly by Stephen Rosner, and in his free time, no less. He was hired by Capcom, or at least a company Capcom owns, to port games like Street Fighter 2 DOS, but he enjoyed creating his own games a lot more than porting them, so in his free time, he coded from scratch this Mega Man game just for fun. Capcom ended up hearing about this and was like, yo, we could make money off of this. Let's just sell this as Mega Man DOS. And as a matter of fact, to save money, let's just crop Mega Man 3's cover and make that the cover for Mega Man DOS. And that's what they did. For the record, they did the same box art thing to Mega Man on the Game Boy, but whatever. Capcom is cheap, who would have thought? Anyway, this should give a lot more context to why this game is weird and isn't the smoothest thing ever. Again, it is on DOS, which I cannot stress enough is the main thing holding this game back, but this is practically a fan-made Mega Man game from 1990. I've played fan-made Mega Man games from this century that were way worse and less fleshed out than this, so we've got to give this guy some credit. And those games weren't on DOS, MS-DOS. I feel like a lot of people who talk about just how awful this game is either see the graphics for the first time and make their judgment from the beginning, or they play this game for a few minutes, give up, and then say it's bad. And don't get it twisted, this game is certainly worse than every other mainline Mega Man game, but it is far from being garbage or unplayable like everyone on the internet seems to say. My main problem with this game were the controls being spacebar to shoot and J to jump. That makes sense on paper, but in practice, it's just awkward and makes everything much harder. And I know I could have downloaded a remapping program even if I didn't know how to change controls on my DOS emulator, but I did genuinely want to have the same experience that people had back in the day. And honestly, if the controls were better, I think this would have been better received. It obviously still has some very unfair parts, and the enemies have very small hitboxes, and you know, it doesn't feel like a Mega Man game a lot of times, but it's genuinely not bad at all, especially when you consider the fact that it was done by one human being for MS-DOS in 1990, over 30 years ago. It makes me feel bad for old Stephen, because he didn't do a bad job, and the entire internet makes fun of this game for being one of the worst things ever created, and it's just not. Let me give you my objective review on the game though, as if I didn't know it was made by only one singular human being. Now, the intro stage is awful, probably the worst part of the game in terms of design, just because the only way through is to constantly get hit by that dog. The lack of music is jarring, Mega Man looks weird, and the transition from the intro stage to the stage select screen is also weird. None of those are bad by itself, but the cheap level design is where it gets frustrating when combined with these awful controls. The Sonic Man stage has too many projectiles coming from all over the place to the point where it's hard to even keep track of them, let alone dodge them. That's one big batch room in this stage is also super frustrating due to the hitboxes on the platforms being strange and forcing you to jump awkwardly early. Volt Man stage, on the other hand, takes it a step further with those horrible magnetic sections combined with the block puzzles above spikes, with water pushing down on you, ruining all your jumps. But really, the magnets are the worst part. The magnets are the worst part of this game. If these magnet things weren't there, I think most people would give this game a better chance. I'm being real. But Dynaman stage is actually just fine. The Wily Castle is also better than I expected, but I guess the final boss is a bit underwhelming to say the least. But there are also a lot of great parts about this game that get overlooked. First of all, I really like the glitch where you can skip the hardest stage in the game. I wish I could have used it, but I love glitches in general, and that automatically makes this game way more replayable, which is a big factor when it comes to Mega Man games. I also like the electricity theme in the bosses. Calling a boss Sonic Man is a bit weird, but I like the design of each boss, except for maybe Volt Man. He's a bit weird, but I don't hate his design. It's not bad. I also like the weapons you get from each boss. Sonic Man's weapon is great for the enemies that are too small for you to hit. Volt Man gives you a shield weapon that I actually like, which is a very rare occurrence, as my subscribers would know. And okay, Dynaman's weapon sucks. It's a slightly better Bomb Man's weapon, but I still like how it looks at the very least. Plus, Rockman and Forte stole Dynaman and renamed him to Dynamo Man and made him a lot cooler, which I do appreciate because I love that game, as my subscribers would know. I also even like some of the gimmicks. Despite the intro stage being bad, this was the first time a Mega Man game ever had one, and I think it's a welcome addition to the series. The weird telephone pole gimmick in Voltman stage where getting hit sends you down a level was very cool. I liked getting sucked up into the pipes in Sonic Man stage. I liked the lava platforming section that looks harder than it is, and every time I pointed something out as good game design, I genuinely meant it, because bad game design is the main reason people claim to hate this game, when I don't think that's the problem. The problems in this game are simple. The controls are weird, there are a lot of small enemies, and the game looks weird because it is on MS-DOS. But that's basically it. Sure, it is super hard, but as a Mega Man veteran who's beaten all the mainline Mega Man games probably over 100 times, it's nice to have something challenging and new. It feels unfair at first, but once you beat a level level and go back and replay it, everything is easier just like the normal Mega Man series. Again, this game isn't as good as the rest of the series, but saying the difficulty is why this game is bad is weird considering the rest of the series is also generally considered to be difficult the first time you play it. I mean, that's what Mega Man is all about. You learn about the game your first playthrough and then you perfect your skills and keep playing. And I think the developer had this in mind when making the game. I don't want to sit here and praise the game as if it was an amazing entry in the franchise or anything other than a fun challenge, but I do want to emphasize that it's not as bad as everyone says it is, especially considering it was made by one singular human being for MS-DOS. If you want to try this game out for yourself, you can actually play it online just by googling Mega Man DOS online, but make sure in the settings you choose VGA graphics so it doesn't look like cyan and pink, unless you prefer that, you know, whatever. But more importantly, set the joystick to off, otherwise you'll be stuck on the title screen because it won't recognize your keyboard controls. But if you're a pro Mega Man player and think this game looks easy, please give it a try and commit to beating the game all the way through before you judge it. And once you do beat the game all the way through, beat it one more time for good measure just to see how much easier it is. Because if you're a true Mega Man veteran, you would know that that's how all the Mega Man games are the first time you play them. They're hard, then you beat them, and you're like, oh, that was fun, but I bet that would be hard to beat again. And then you beat it again, and you're like, oh, this is so fun. You come up with all kinds of ideas, you get creative. You know the drill. You guys are Mega Man fans. So my final verdict on this game is that in general, I would give it a 6 out of 10. The controls are awful, some of the hitboxes are weird, there are cheap difficulty sections, and worst of all, there is no music. But it's still a fun game at the end of the day if you sit down and commit to playing it all the way through, especially for MS-DOS. And when everyone else is giving it a 0 or a 1 out of 10, I think this is a great score, 6 out of 10 being the great score. I mean, generally that's considered mediocre, but for an MS-DOS game that's generally considered to be a 0 out of 10, 6 out of 10 is great. As far as the Mega Man games go, I would give it a 1 out of 10, but that's not fair because I don't think anyone was expecting Mega Man level quality from this. Plus, the other Mega Man games were made by teams and, more importantly, aren't on DOS. MS-DOS. I can't stress this enough. Okay, actually, there are a few other Mega Man games on MS-DOS, but I'll cover those on another Wii Wednesday if you guys really want to see it. Comment in the comments if you do, because I don't want to do it if you guys don't want to see it, trust me. But I've heard the next Mega Man DOS game has twice as many bosses, so I hope they aren't as hard as some of these, because I might go insane and you'll see it live on camera. Well, that was Mega Man DOS. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video a lot more than I enjoyed Mega Man DOS, because again, while I do enjoy this game, it's still not super fun, and I probably won't play it again ever or anytime soon at the very least, unless you guys want to see me speedrun the game and get the world record. There are only 13 people on the speedrun leaderboard for this game, so I could at least get in the top 15. That's for certain.